Hola and welcome to today's topic. We're going to be talking about present tense, but only when things go to plan. So, as you're going to learn about Spanish, sometimes we have verbs that play by the rules. We call those regular verbs, and other times we have verbs that are irregular or do something that doesn't follow the rule set that we learned. So, this is our first tense present, and we have a list of verbs that we're going to be able to use today that is distinct from the irregular list that we're going to use in the next video. So, just bear in mind that if you're looking for a verb and you're not finding it in this lesson plan, it's likely an irregular verb. And just to thicken the plot, just because a verb is regular or irregular in one tense, so future, present, or past, doesn't necessarily mean it will be in other tenses. Hooray! So why don't we get started with the content for today? So we're going to be focusing on just the regular verbs, and we're going to follow a multi-step process to do that. So if I zoom out ever so slightly, you can see that we're going to try to follow a 5-step process that will get us to the correct answer every single time, given that the verb is regular. So we got to do a little lay of the land. We got to name some things first off. Now, I know this might feel like 6th grade grammar class a little bit. I get that. But what we're really aiming to do is just better understand, okay, what is an infinitive and how do I do this little math problem to understand what goes into an infinitive? So let's get started. The first thing is that every verb has a base form. We do this in English as well. That's called the infinitive. And I like to remember that because it's like you have infinite possibilities from this starting point. In English, all of our infinitives sound a little bit like to drink, to go, to visit, to have. And in Spanish, they're just one word, and they're always every single time, 100% of the time, no exceptions, ending in AR, ER, or IR. So as you can see, we've chosen 3 verbs that, again, follow the rules of today. So these are safe verbs to use. Hablar with an AR ending, comer with an ER, and vivir with an IR ending. So I promised a little bit of math earlier. If we want the infinitive in its entirety, we're going to need to take what's called the stem plus whichever ending it is, one of those 3, and that's what equals the infinitive. So we're breaking down kind of all the components, the anatomy of an infinitive verb. So if we look at an example, we might be thinking, okay, the ending here, that's IR. So everything before that, the VIV, is going to be called the stem. This will become more important in next video, but it's just good to get acclimated now. What's the stem? What's the ending? And then all of that put together. So VIV, IR, VV, or the whole thing is called the infinitive. The length of the stem is going to vary. Some verbs are really long and other ones are really short. So just bear in mind that this stem is pretty variable. These endings are always the same 3, and then we get the infinitive. Okay, so let's say that we've taken off our ending, which leaves us with, in this basic math problem, that's right, just the stem. So we've got able, com, and vive because they're now missing those endings that we started with. And here's something that you've seen if you've been keeping track of all the videos. In the ser and estar video, we talked a little bit about how these are always going to be our people, our subjects, our stars of the show. And so if you're able to track with, okay, I know who everyone is that I'll want to be conjugating for, because that's what we're doing today. We're conjugating verbs from their infinitive into present tense. You're going to get really familiar with these. So I would take the time, if you can, to make a flashcard with all of this data on it, or to just really better understand, okay, do I know exactly who my subject is every time? It's not always this easy. Sometimes you will get él or nosotros, and it's muy fácil, right? You know exactly which line of the chart you're on, but what if it's just Armando or mi mejor amiga or los jugadores de fútbol? If it's some group or individual person, we're going to have to find out where they fit on the chart. We'll get some practice with that later on. So let's say we've chosen our person, our subject that we're going to be conjugating for. Then we need to marry up that person with the chart that we're going to see next, with the correct, what we call conjugation. And then we put everything all together and we end up with yo como, tú hablas, and ellos viven, for example. So try to see if you can understand for just a second what each of those means. We don't have a full sentence necessarily. We've only got our subject, which is our main character. And then we've also got the verb that they're doing, that action, and it's unique to that person now. So instead of just to eat, to speak, and to live, we've now made that specific. So think one more second or pause, and then I'm going to tell you what the answers are. So yo como means I eat. You'll often just hear como. You won't always actually hear the yo, and same can be the case down here. And the reason for that, before we get any further, is because I get this question all the time. The yo, the tú, and the nosotros, yes, there is this variation for female, but really, these are the only options. There's no commas. There's no anybody else that could confuse you about, oh, what's that conjugation going with? That's different, of course, than él, ella, usted, mi mejor amiga, or ellos, ellas, ustedes, mis padres, and so on. So if you're using a conjugation, yet again, a verb in its new format, like you see right here, that's for the yo, you might not actually hear someone say yo. They might just say como. For instance, como manzanas is I eat apples without really saying I. Same thing with tú. No ambiguity. So if I see the conjugations, which we're going to see in a second, of an as here, hablas, I know that you, informal, right? So I'm comfortable with this person. You speak or you talk. And lastly, ellos, are we pronouncing that double L properly? Give it a try. Viven, and this is they live. Now, here's what I don't know. I don't know exactly the composition of this group of they. I mean, in English, we never know, right? But in Spanish, it's telling you at least one male, so chico, hombre, señor, is a part of this group. Everybody else in it could be female, but we know there's at least one male, possibly all males, making up they live. And the real magic, of course, once we have our subjects and our verbs, is figuring out how to make a full sentence out of all of this, which of course will require some vocabulary and a little more practice, but we're learning each component kind of separately, and then we'll put them all together. So here's what I'm showing you now, zoomed out a little bit. These are the 3 charts that you really need to learn. If this is just a review for you, you may already know these, just make sure you know them back and forth. And what that means is, can I choose something random? So like, can I quiz myself and say, okay, what's the nosotros for ER? And what's the tú for IR? And get all of those answers correct. But at the beginning, if you've never seen this before, we need to talk about some of the things that are similar and different between these charts. And just like little kids when they're learning how to count, going, I'm 5, right? You might want to take the time to learn these charts as kind of a melodic flow, right? So when I was first learning the AR chart, I would say it to myself like, oh, as, a, amos, ad. And that's how I remembered it. I had trouble with each individual thing and maybe like reading it backwards or just choosing one, but that was my starting point, was putting everything into kind of a sing-song format in my head. So if we're looking at these, I know they're quite small to all fit, but we want to see if there are any patterns. Is there anything that we can discern? Okay, this seems to be the same throughout. Now, I want you to pause this video now if you want to take a second to think about it yourself, but otherwise, to keep things brief and snappy, I'm just going to tell you. So the yo forms across the board, meaning I, right? Yo here and here and here, all share the same o. So if you hear someone say hablo or vivo or trabajo, you're not going to know exactly what verb that came from because it could be any of the 3. It's also, though, very nice to memorize just one. If it's yo and it's a regular verb, I keep making this point. You can see this title, regular present tense, only because this may not be the case all the time when we get to the next lesson plan. So we're staying focused on, okay, if everything's going to plan, all of my yo forms are O's. All of my tú forms have an S on the end. All of my él, ella, usted is just one vowel. My nosotros has a mos every single time. And with that mos, the vowel that I started with in the ending. So the a from a, ere, de, and the e. And then down below, everything ends in an N, 2 letters for ellos and ellas and ustedes, which remember, ustedes means you all. What we don't have in here is Spain right now, but that's vosotros. And vosotros would be very similar in that you would have a similar ending. It'd be ais and ace and is. Okay, so they'd all have S's. Now, If you look a little harder at the ER and the IR, you might notice something, which is that they are not very different. They're actually only different in one place. If you want to pause to take a look at where that is, do it. If you want me to just tell you, let it roll. It's the nosotros form, and it's only different by one letter. It's only different by the A or the E based on which verb it is, which gives you a better hint. If you hear bebemos, what do we now know about that verb? Bebemos. We hear hemos, and we know our vowel sounds real well by this point. You would know that's got to be an ER verb, and you might even be able to work backwards and say that hemos could come off and the ER could come back on. And that would tell me my infinitive, which is the infinite possibilities starter verb, is beber. That one I chose in particular because a lot of people forget the ending for that one, which is really common. So being able to memorize, but also being dynamic enough to start with beber and get to bebemos, and then start from bebemos and get back to beber, because you'll always need to come back to the infinitive to get to any other tense. It's like being on the highway. If you take an exit, you might get into a subdivision or a no outlet or something, and sometimes you got to get back on the highway to get to other places. So there's something else that I added just as a little bonus for you. Do you see down here, ser and estar are back? Because here's the thing I know from doing this forever about memorizing. You likely, at my suggestion and urging, spent a ton of time memorizing your ser and estar charts. And I commend you for that. That's fantastico. But you may be looking at this now and going, oh yeah, I definitely recognize it. But would you be able to fill the chart in with no help? Would you be able to just answer what's the nosotros for estar? What's the usted for ser? And if that's still a little shaky or a little difficult, no shade. It's really just something you're going to want to put a little more effort into. And the other reason I put this here is to show you the difference, the diferencia, because here's the thing. Ser and estar are not regular verbs. Why did I put them on the regular present tense plan? I know, okay, don't be mad. The reason they're here is to show you that. Because if we look at ser, while the ER ending verb conjugations are in view, you see, okay, yeah, this is an ER verb, and I can see now that a Y here and a totally different start of an E here, right? And two letters only here. These do not match what we were supposed to see in an ER verb chart, which makes them irregular. So it's just really showing you if things aren't marrying up, if you're taking all your steps and doing your math problem and getting the wrong answer, that means it's an irregular verb. In the case of estar, which it's going to be tough to see, but in the case of estar, it's really close. The only differences are that the yo form ends in a Y, estoy, instead of like esto. That's actually a different word in Spanish. And there's accents everywhere, which we also were not prepared for. We don't see any accents being featured in this chart. So this one is trying so hard to be regular, but still didn't quite make the cut. It doesn't follow the steps we learned today. Okay, so this has all been conceptual for these first few minutes. We need to actually get into the weeds and do this, right? We need to try this. So here's what we're going to do. I've provided a couple verbs that we're going to want to use in using our hands, kind of getting this accomplished together. And what I'm going to do right now is offer you the choice, if this is a review for you, or if you're somewhat familiar with conjugating verbs, I want you to pause right here while everything is blank and try to fill it in yourself. So try to take a note, like a piece of paper or wherever you're keeping your notes for Spanish or a different document, and just try typing in what should the answers be for I work, you work, she works, and etc. Right? So if you can make that happen right now, then you can check your answers against what I show. If you are like, I have no clue how to do this, then let's keep going. So I like an assembly line approach, but I'll show you both ways. So for this first chart, I'm going to do the assembly line. And that's basically the lazy way. Okay, ready for the lazy way? I did my math problem, which was that I take my infinitive, I subtract the AR, and this is what I'm left with, trabaja. And remember, we have an H sound to this. And I am going to just copy this and paste it in over and over and over again, like an assembly line. I'm in charge of the stem right now, okay? And then maybe it's me again, or somebody else is going to go in and add all of the endings to these stems, which will give us, ta-da, our conjugation. Okay, so those are the steps that we've been following in our 5-step process. If I can slow it down a little bit, it was I had to identify my verb, which was already given to us. I had to remove my AR. And now I'm deciding in this next step who is speaking. I've got all my choices here, so I'm going to have everybody be speaking at some point. And now I'm going to add my endings to get my final product. So for yo, and here's what you're probably going to do. You're going to go, I don't remember all of them. You've shown them to me one time, or maybe you have them printed out in front of you. Great. I highly recommend jotting these down. You might need to scroll. Okay. Or in other words, look, because I don't expect you to have this memorized. So I'm scrolling back up to say, what was that AR ending? Oh, that's right. On the yo line across, I saw an O. So I'm going to type an O. On the to form, I saw us. So I'm going to type us. On the, and this is just over and over. So you're just seeing me take the drop in the I'd scroll back up and see amos. I'd scroll up one last time and see on. And this is reinforcing and further strengthening your memorization of this, going, oh yeah, okay, now I am seeing that AN ending going with the last line of the chart, or the AOS line of the chart, however you want to remember it. If you have kind of a photographic memory or a visual memory, you might want to see this whole chart in your head the first couple times you're using it. So this is all well and good. We finally have real words, right? Before we just had chunks and fragments and like adding things up, kind of like we had a bunch of Legos, but like no castle yet. Now we have castle, which is exciting, but we have to pronounce it properly. So let me just take a little aside to make sure we're pronouncing all of our words the right way. It's going to be really important for us when we are speaking out loud. I mean, you can write this down till the cows come home and be absolutely correct, but we want to make sure it sounds correct out loud. That's part of speaking. So pause here, okay, and make yourself a little assignment. Your assignment is to underline, highlight, put a caret above, I don't care, the vowel that gets the emphasis. And if you're having a lot of trouble remembering what any of this is about, lesson 1B is all about how to pronounce, right? We had our 3 columns and we were trying to make our decisions based on, do I see any accents? Here we don't. And then if we don't see an accent, that's where the hard work comes in, where we have to decide what ending do I have? So pause here, and then I'm going to show you if you're ready. So let's take our first one. It ends in a vowel. If we end in a vowel, an N or an S, I'm going to go to the second to last, and I'm going to do this all the way down. So ends in an S, which is an NS or a vowel, second to last. Ends in a vowel, second to last. This one's a bit of a switch up. I'm doing the exact same rule, ends in an S, so I go to my second to last, which if you're tracking is a bit of a different place than it was before. No, I didn't mean to take my J with it. That one doesn't need to be pronounced. Extra, and then down here, okay, I end in an N, second to last. So it's actually the same rule all the way down, right? I'm wanting the second to last of each of these, and we want to make sure, again, lesson 1B will make this more clear, that I'm pronouncing that J as an H sound, so it doesn't just get lost. So if you want to repeat after me, you'd be saying, yo trabajo, trabajo, tú trabajas, ella, usted trabaja, trabaja, right? If you want to use your hands, do that. That's what I've always done. Nosotros trabajamos. Ellos, ellas, ustedes trabajan. Okay, very good. Pause it, rewind, go back and do it again if you need to. So that was the assembly line technique, which of course you can do whatever you like. If I don't want to do that, I can do the formula on each and every line. It's a little more work, but it's more repetition, which can be helpful. So I might do a little dance in my head that says, okay, I'm prepared. I have an ER verb here. This is the verb I was provided, but we could say that I thought of it. So I go, okay, I want to use comer. I need to take that ER off. That leaves me with COM. I need to add something, which I'm going to go need to check my chart for. And oh, as predicted, yo forms always end in an O. It's como. I come down here. I say, okay, I started with comer. I remove the ER. I get COM. I come back up. I see ES. I add that. Comes. And again, this will sound really repetitive and you can feel free to not listen to this piece, but it's like, I start with comer, I take the ER off, I get COM, I go back up to my chart, I check the ending, it's an E. Start with comer, remove the ER, get COM. And then I'm going to add the ending relevant. And I go, oh, okay, I'm starting to remember my rules. My rules were that it's always mos, but I borrow the vowel from my ending. So I'll do my vowel and then my mos. And lastly, I start at comer. I remove my ER. I get COM. And then I add what ending I'm going to go check, or maybe if I'm feeling more confident, I'll try to guess. Okay, I think I remember there was N's and this one isn't the AN, it's the EN. Okay. And I can go check all of my information somewhere else. Or again, if you have like flashcards of these written out, there's a lot of benefit in handwriting for yourself what those conjugations are supposed to be. Okay. Pronunciation. Is anything different than before in terms of our endings? Take a peek. Vowel, S, N. So it's going to be the same. Okay. If you want to fill it in, pause now and highlight. If not, keep going. Second to last. Second to last. And I know this feels very repetitive, but I encourage you to think about any skill that you picked up that didn't require some repetition. I know it's a little bland, okay, but it is part of the dance. Whether it's something athletic or learning a new skill or hobby, you probably had to do it somewhere north of 1,000 times before it felt really solid. So for this one, we're pronouncing como. Yo como. Tú comes. Ella come. Nosotros comemos. Ellos comen. Okay. Last one. Give this a pause if you want to try to fill this in. My big hint for you is that this chart is not very different than one of the charts we've already filled in. So if you've been using the scroll method or having to peek, you might actually have the answers right in front of you with one exception. So if you're ready, let's do this. So I'm going to do my assembly line because I am lazy, and you can do whatever you like. And in the real world, I mean, unless you want this to be your party trick, you're never going to be filling in the whole thing, right? You're only going to be choosing the appropriate person, or maybe you'll have a conversation that's like, I live here, he lives there, they live over there, but it's not that common, right? In a real conversation. So you're probably only going to have to do this once. So we get our VIV because we took our IR off. And then I realize that ER and IR share a chart, except for, I'm going to go fix right now what's not the same, which was I need to borrow this I and then do my mos. But everything else, I am just going to straight copy from above. Okay, and then I do an ES. And then I do an E right here. And then I've already got my nosotros, I took care of it. And then I've got an EN at the bottom, and it's the exact same. And that's it. Okay. I'm not going to highlight this time. If you want to go in and do that yourself, you're welcome to, but I'm just going to pronounce, and maybe you can either reverse engineer from what you're hearing, or you already know the rules. So it would be vivo, vives, vive. I know I don't have to do the facial expressions. That's more for me than for you. Vivimos and viven. So hopefully you're hearing which vowel is getting the emphasis, and it checks out with the rules that you've learned. Now, that's really it for the concept, okay? So just to briefly summarize, what we're trying to do is know what verb we want, which is kind of hard, right? The way you're going to do that is having a list, having flashcards, or some prior knowledge that this is review, but you're going to need to know what the action or the verb is that's going to be committed. You need to know who the person is, right? You're going to remove your AR, ER, or IR, and then you're going to add the ending appropriate to the person. If you want to be incredibly fancy, this is a great opportunity to go above and beyond, but you definitely don't have to. So let me explain how this practice works. I've provided you two components that we need: what the infinitive of the verb is and the person I want you to use. So we've got yo and we've got hablar. All I'm asking you to do is to conjugate hablar for yo in the present tense, because we only know present tense so far. So if I want to do that, I'm going to just throw the yo in. I'm going to use them each time. If you don't want to, because you're around a bunch of Spanish speakers that don't, that's okay. Just make sure your conjugations are really spot on, because otherwise there's no saving you, right? Because there's no match. So I get yo. I get able because I've removed my ending. I check my charts. I'm going to scroll up ever so slightly and go, okay, trabajar is an AR verb too, so I can borrow the ending. Oh, that's right. It's a no. And maybe you've heard no hablo español or something. And then you're like, oh, that person's saying I don't speak or I don't talk. Okay. So yo hablo, you can stop here. If this is enough for you right now and you look down the list, which you're going to do eventually, and you find out that you're supposed to do this 12 times over and you're like, this is going to take forever, feel free to just do this and be done. But if you really want to make this stick, if you want to make this into more of a solid practice, what you probably want to do is add a vocabulary word. It's not going to be easy, but if you have a verb and nothing with it in your head, what are you going to do? So I think of hablar and I go, okay, what do you talk or speak? Language, maybe slow, fast, talk a lot. That's me, right? So you might want to look some of those words up, or maybe you're already getting familiar with some adjectives through working through the book or something. So maybe I say, yo hablo rápidamente, because I'm practicing a big, long word, and I wanted to try one that has an accent. So I'm saying rápidamente, right? And this, for my own purposes, I could write the translation so I don't forget later. I speak quickly or I talk fast is a little more colloquial in English. Ta-da! And now I have my whole sentence. And it can be that we added here, this is actually an adverb, ly, but you could add an adjective, you could add a noun, you could add both. You could say, I live in a, or rather, we're doing two here. You live in a big house, or you live in the blue apartment or something, right? Where you're getting some practice with, I'm going to do colors and I'm going to practice some places that people live. So take it as you will, do as much work as you think is necessary. There's also extra practice in complete Spanish step by step. If you're tracking with that book, I highly recommend checking out chapter 5, which actually corresponds with my lesson 5. I also will be providing you some extra practice if you need. So some extra tarea on this topic. You may be doing some translations, things like that. And I'm always encouraging, if you can muster it, make your own sentences. Very hard to do, but basically what you'd need to be thinking is as you get comer provided to you as to eat, you say, okay, but what do I do with that? Well, it could be we eat meat, or she doesn't eat meat. She's vegetarian. We might just try different kind of playing with this with the different people in the charts. And the thing that I promised I would mention, but haven't done so far, not everyone's going to fit in our chart perfectly. I only tried to trip you up once, okay? But I provided la empleada. And you might be going, I have no idea what that means. And that's okay. This is from when I teach business. I normally include this word. It's a female employee. So this just says the employee. And our goal is the employee rights. Now, you don't even have to necessarily know. I mean, it's ideal if you do. You don't have to know what this means to be able to do this sentence properly. You're seeing something feminine, something singular, right? Because it's not las empleadas, it's just one. So if we go back to the drawing board with la empleada and say, where is that going to fit in my chart? We'll choose this chart because it's also an IR chart. I think that crossing some people off might be the best bet to start. In doing that, you would say, well, the employee, I am not the employee. It's not I. You are not the employee, because otherwise that would be made clear, right? So it's not I, it's not you. It's not plural people, right? So it can't be either of these bottom ones. So really it's like, okay, it's a singular person that's not me or you, then I guess it's got to be this singular third person. So bear in mind that you're going to see this all the time. You're going to see examples of el, ella, usted standing in for la empleada, a name, even a state. You could say Idaho, or something. And that would be, again, a singular third person. Sometimes it's an object, objects can do actions too. It could be, the computer breaks or something, right? And now a computer is doing an action, but it's just one computer. So it's still going to be el, ella, usted. So A little bit of critical thinking is necessary to make this happen in some of these examples. And if these are too easy for you, or this is a review, feel free to switch some of these out. Throw in something that would be hard to say. My dog Max, or all of my bandmates, or something. How would you conjugate for that? Regardless of what the verb is, you're really trying to marry up these people on the left with somewhere in the chart before you even get started, because otherwise you'll get a bit stuck. So I wish you the best of suerte on this homework. There is more practice, absolutely. If you're tuned in with the Spanish dictionary drill that I've mentioned a couple of times, that's another really great place to practice. On SpanishDictionary.com, you can go to their conjugation drill. You can select, for now, just regular present tense, all the people you want, what verbs to be inputted, and then you can generate yourself blanks to fill in with real-time feedback. So that's another really great way to practice this. But as you're probably predicting, the best way to practice is just to get going with it. Start with the easiest things first, like filling in blanks or doing the minimum. And then as you get a little bit better, throw in some vocabulary words and try to test and trick yourself into, ooh, which one am I going to use? Because that's how you're going to know that you really know it. So I wish you luck. I will see you back here when you're ready, when you're solid enough in these conjugations that you feel like you can do this without having to look every time. Come back for the next lesson where we're going to learn what to do with those irregular verbs that don't follow the rules. Okay, muchas gracias. Catch you next time. Ciao.